Hi guys, and welcome to this new episode of The Inexplicable. Christmas is just around the corner. And just like in the past, when the night of December 24th became the perfect occasion to tell stories of dark presences, today I gather you here in front of my fireplace to tell you a story. 7 very peculiar ghost stories. There are ghost stories that are simply scary, and then there are tales that change people's lives forever. Testimonies so remarkable they reached courtrooms, local news, and historical records. Stories in which ghosts didn't just appear suddenly, they left real consequences. In this episode, I'll cover 7 documented cases, encounters with the unknown that had real impacts on those involved. Some of these episodes can be verified in legal archives, while others still resonate today in the pages of history. Get ready, because what you're about to hear defies logic and leaves many questions unanswered. Booty or Barnaby? Imagine 17th century England. It's 1687, a time suspended, balanced between two worlds. On one side, the emerging modern science; on the other, ancient superstitions, primal fears, and the belief that the invisible could still interfere with people's lives. The laws of the kingdom were beginning to take on a more rational form, but the courts remained places where, at times, the supernatural could still make itself heard, if we can put it that way. And it was precisely in this context that one of the strangest and most unsettling cases ever recorded in the history of English jurisprudence was born. A case that, if it weren't actually recorded in the archives of the Court of the King's Bench in 1688, would seem little more than a legend told around the fire. Its official name was Booty versus Barnaby, but everyone at the time remembered it in another way. The case of the trial of the ghost. Where it began on May 15, 1687. Captain Barnaby of England was sailing in the Mediterranean when his ship anchored near Stromboli, a volcanic island in Italy. It was a quiet afternoon. The sea was calm, and part of the crew, about 30 men, had gone inland to hunt rabbits on the slopes of the volcano. Then something happened on the black rock, dark as coal. 2 figures appeared, running. One was in front, staggering like a man in terror. The other was chasing him closely. A dark figure completely wrapped in black, silent, relentless. Captain Barnaby watched the scene for several interminable seconds, then felt a chill run down his spine. Yes, because he recognized that the man who was running away was Mr. Booty, his neighbor, a respectable merchant from Gravesend, England. The two kept running toward the smoking crater of the volcano and then suddenly disappeared, swallowed up by the flames. Barnaby was paralyzed, and so were others. All 30 men present swore they had seen exactly the same scene, the same face, the same clothes, the same hellish chase. Months later, when the ship returned to England, the captain learned some shocking news. Mr. Booty had died, and he had died exactly on May 15, 1687. At the same time when he and his crew had seen him running toward the fire of Stromboli. The news spread quickly. According to Barnaby, what he had seen couldn't have been a flesh and blood man. It was Booty's spirit, chased by a dark entity, perhaps the devil himself, dragged toward hell to pay an unknown debt. The story became legend, but not everyone was willing to accept it. Widow Booty, outraged and furious, decided to take the captain to court. The charge was very serious: posthumous defamation. She said claiming her husband was seen running toward hell tarnished his honor even after death. The case reached the King's Bench, the highest court in the kingdom, a solemn courtroom, judges in robes, and in Captain Barnaby's hands, a logbook where every detail of the incident had been recorded precisely. Barnaby was not alone. 30 men from his crew testified under oath that they had seen the exact same apparition, the same man, the same clothes, at the same moment. In the end, the verdict was delivered, and it left everyone speechless. According to the court, 30 witnesses could not have been mistaken. The sighting was considered credible. Since the story was true, Barnaby was acquitted and Mrs. Buddy lost the case. Thus, in 1688, an English court officially ruled that a ghost had really been seen. A verdict that seems absurd to skeptics, unsettling and yet real, still preserved today in the official records of English law. An episode that makes you smile and shiver simultaneously, because perhaps for the first and only time in history, a ghost won in court. The ghost of Russell Colvin. In May of 1812 in Manchester, Vermont, a man named Russell Colvin disappeared without a trace. No explanation, no leads, just silence. Suspicions began to fall on those who hated him the most, brothers Jess and Stephen Bourne, Colvin's brothers-in-law. For 7 long years, the mystery remained unsolved, and then an incredible story emerged. Colvin's uncle, Amos Bourne, began to have recurring, disturbing, and very vivid dreams. And in the dreams, the ghost of Russell appeared, saying that he hadn't simply disappeared, but had been the victim of a murder. And not only that, in the dream, he guided Amos to an old cellar on the Bourne farm, pointing out where his remains would be hidden. However, when the authorities investigated, no body was found at that spot, only some items that belonged to Colvin. And shortly after, a dog discovered bone fragments in another part of the property. So the murder was not just a simple hypothesis. The Bourne brothers were immediately arrested. At first they swore they had nothing to do with the murder, but after being subjected to violent and coercive interrogations, they eventually gave in and confessed. Justice seemed ready to be served. John was sentenced to life in prison, Stephen to the gallows. And yet, something didn't add up. Further investigations brought to light a fact that completely changed the situation. The bones found by the bloodhound did not belong to Colvin at all. And the final twist came in December 1819, when a witness claimed to have seen Russell Colvin in New Jersey, alive and well. Since the verdict had already been pronounced, these new elements were, in a sense, ignored. But just over a month before Stephen Colvin's execution, he appeared in person, returning to Manchester, and at that point, the Bourne brothers were finally exonerated. Truth revealed, incredible case. It invites us to reflect on the power of dreams and the unconscious. Maybe Hammonds wasn't just imagining. Maybe dreams are a channel to the unknown, a bridge between what we see and what we don't understand. However, this doesn't mean that they always portray the reality of the facts. And if it hadn't been for the simple fact that Colvin decided to retrace his steps, a man would have died because of a simple nighttime vision. The GHOST of HAMMERSMITH. London, winter of 1804. The streets of Hammersmith are shrouded in darkness, barely lit by flickering lanterns. It is a city already accustomed to fear, theft, misery, silent nights broken by unknown footsteps. But this time it's different. This time London is afraid of a ghost. For weeks, a disturbing rumor has been circulating. A figure dressed in white roams the alleys, appears suddenly, terrifies passers-by, and then vanishes into thin air. Some speak of a specter, others of a damned soul. The legend grows so quickly that it becomes a collective reality. The tension explodes when a pregnant woman claims to have been attacked by the ghost. 2 days later, she dies. Even without concrete evidence, the Hammersmith officer is the final confirmation. The ghost exists and it's dangerous. Armed patrols are improvised vigilantes who roam the streets at night, prepared to defend the neighborhood from what they don't understand. Francis Smith, an officer of the seas, is among them. On the night of January 3rd, 1804, Smith sees a figure approaching him. It's dressed in white and responds to his warnings. For Smith, there is no doubt. It's the Hammersmith ghost. So without thinking too much, he shoots. The figure falls to the ground. But it wasn't a ghost at all. Thomas Millwood, just a simple bricklayer, guilty only of wearing white clothes for work. England remains shocked. Can fear be a justification for murder? Disturbing details emerged during the trial. More witnesses say they already ran away in panic when they saw Millwood dressed in white. The legend changed perceptions of reality. The jury first wanted to convict Smith of manslaughter only, but the judge forces them to choose between guilty of murder or innocent, so they declare him guilty and sentence him to death. And from that moment on, suddenly, the Hammersmith ghost disappears. No more sightings, no more testimonies, as if it had never existed. But a life had still been taken. This case isn't about spirits, but about something perhaps even more frightening. Collective psychosis. The shared fear that becomes truth, the legend that kills a ghost that never existed, but still claimed a life. The Gray Man. The case I'm about to tell you about is truly incredible. It's one of those stories that teeters between legend and reality. Moreover, it offers a view of ghosts not as dark entities to be feared, but as something to embrace openly in your life. Confused about what I just told you? Well, listen carefully. Police Island is a small coastal town in South Carolina. A quiet place between the ocean and silence, yet one of the most unsettling and fascinating in American tradition. For over 2 centuries, the story here is of an entity that neither screams, chases, nor terrifies. A ghost that, according to legend, protects. They call him the Gray Man, the Gray Man. The first sightings date all the way back to 1822. Witnesses describe a lone figure in gray clothes walking slowly along the beach, especially at dusk or on foggy nights. He leaves no footprints, rarely speaks, and often disappears before passers-by. One common story says the Gray Man was a young man in love. He crossed the coast to propose to the woman he loved when he got trapped in the quicksands. Temori. Since then, his spirit would be condemned to wander along the shore, searching for eternity for what he has lost. What makes this ghost unique is what he does. On Polis Island, it is said that seeing the Gray Man before a hurricane is a sign of salvation, a kind of benevolent omen. Whoever meets him, whoever catches his gaze or receives his silent warning, is spared from destruction. And as much as it may seem like just a baseless legend, there is a modern, documented case that has sent chills even down the spines of skeptics. September 1989. Hurricane Hugo, one of the most devastating in United States history, is about to hit the coast. Jim and Clara Moore, an elderly couple, are walking near their home on the beach, and that's when they see a gray figure slowly moving along the shore. He doesn't look at them, he doesn't speak, but his presence is so intense that it compels them, without any real explanation, to walk away. A few hours later, Hugo strikes Polis Island with devastating fury. Homes leveled, neighborhoods destroyed. When the couple returns, they discover something inexplainable. Their house is completely intact. Everything around is destroyed, but their cottage seems to have been protected by an invisible force. Since then, the gray man is no longer considered just a ghost, but a guardian, a melancholy soul who seeks neither revenge nor fear, but redemption. And maybe, while the wind howls and the ocean rebels, is there still someone walking on the beach, not to frighten the living, but to save them? Lois Cottage. In 1994, an English family, seemingly like any other, decided to change their lives. Andrew and Josie Smith moved with their 3 children to Lois Cottage, a centuries-old sandstone house nestled in the quiet of the village of Upper Mayfield. A place that seemed perfect on paper, but according to the Smiths, was a haven for dark presences. Shortly after the move, paranormal phenomena began. Objects moving on their own, unexplained noises, fleeting presences seen out of the corner of the eye, shadows that seemed to watch them in the dead of night. But what Josie later recounted goes far beyond a simple poltergeist. One night, while she was in bed, she claimed to have been attacked by an invisible presence. She said she felt hands pulling at her, a force trying to strangle her, and even trying to rape her in the empty room. Incredible, yet for her it was completely real. Investigating the history of the house, the family learned about a local legend, that of a young milkmaid who had lived there centuries before, brutally raped and killed. Smith no longer had any doubt. That spirit had never left the Lois cottage and was full of anger and rage, which it vented by tormenting the members of the family. Terrified, the couple decided to flee, but the story doesn't end with a door closed behind them. The previous owners, Susan Melbourne and Sandra Podmore, sued the Smith couple for £3,000, the last installment of the house payment. The response was sensational. The Smiths countersued, claiming that the house was haunted and that this detail had been deliberately hidden at the time of sale. In 1999, the case reached the Derby County Court. In court, the story seemed like a horror movie, but one detail left everyone speechless. The testimony of a priest, Reverend Peter McForn, who was called to bless the house, stated under oath that he had felt a presence in that place. Something he couldn't exactly explain, but which, according to him, was definitely not the result of suggestion. However, the priest's testimony was not enough and the judge remained skeptical. The verdict was unfavorable to Smith, who was ordered to pay £3,000. No official recognition of the haunting, no justice, at least from a legal standpoint. Yet a shadow remains because that trial did not prove the existence of ghosts, but neither did it prove their absence. The Lois Cottage still preserves its silence today, a silence that may one day be broken by the alleged presences that inhabit the place, and they will finally prove the Smiths right. The Ghost of Coak Lane. London, winter of 1762. A noisy, overcrowded metropolis, filled with carriages, smoke, and superstition. It's a city where public executions attract large crowds and newspapers thrive on scandal and rumors. Yet even London was not prepared for what was about to happen in a narrow and anonymous alley called Coak Lane in the Smithfield district. One of history's most famous paranormal cases began here, not because it proved the existence of ghosts, but because it revealed how fragile the truth can be when fear, revenge, and sensationalism come into play. The story began a few years earlier when William Kent and his wife Fanny moved into a house on Coak Lane rented from a man named Richard Parsons. At first, everything seemed normal, but after just 6 months, the situation deteriorated and a bitter financial dispute arose between Kent and Parsons. William had lent some money to the landlord, but Parsons refused to pay it back. Their relationship broke down and Kent left the house. Shortly after, Fanny died of smallpox, a terrible but unfortunately common disease at the time. No investigation, no suspicion, until January 1762. That's when William Kent came across an article published in the Public Ledger, a very famous newspaper at the time. Reading it, he was petrified. His name was printed in black and white, associated with a monstrous accusation, the murder of his wife. According to the article, Fanny hadn't died of smallpox. She had been poisoned with arsenic. And the source of this revelation wasn't just any witness, but her ghost. Richard Parsons claimed that Fanny's spirit was haunting the house on Coak Lane. He said the woman appeared to him in a dream, and later, during mysterious nighttime events, revealed the truth about her death, directly accusing Kent. To prove all this, Parsons organized seances. William Kent was invited to his former home in an atmosphere full of tension. Leading the seance was a Reverend John Moore. The rules were simple. They asked the spirit questions, and the answers came in the form of knocks. One knock meant yes, two knocks meant no, and every knock seemed to tell the same story. Kent was guilty. The news exploded like dynamite. The London press pounced on the case like a vulture, and Coak Lane became the center of an unprecedented media case. Crowds of onlookers gathered in front of the haunted house, and seances multiplied. Many believed the verdict was set. A man killed his wife, and her ghost seeks justice. But behind the collective hysteria, someone began to have doubts. More in-depth investigations led to a sensational discovery. The mysterious knocks did not come from anyone beyond, but from the next room. Elizabeth Parsons, the young daughter of Richard, was caught while knocking on a hidden wooden board, simulating the ghost signal. The castle of lies collapsed in an instant. To clear his name, William Kent brought Parsons, Reverend Moore, Parsons' wife, and a maid to justice, accusing them of conspiracy. The court recognized the deception. The defendants were sentenced to short prison terms and forced to compensate Kent, but the verdict did not erase what had happened. Cochrane's ghost did not leave behind a haunted house, but rather a disturbing lesson. In certain cases, ghosts can become powerful tools for revenge and for manipulating public opinion, because sometimes the real supernatural isn't what knocks from the afterlife, but the ease with which a lie can turn into truth. The Greenbrier Ghost. Let's close this episode with the most famous, unsettling, and perhaps most incredible case in all of American history. A case in which a ghost supposedly testified from the afterlife, leading to the actual conviction of its own murderer. We are in rural West Virginia at the end of the 19th century. It's January 23, 1897, when Zona Hister Shue, a young woman just 23 years old, is found dead in her home in Greenbrier County. The scene immediately presents strange elements. When the doctor arrives, he finds Zona's husband, Erasmus Trott Shue, has already moved her body. He brought her from downstairs to the bedroom, laid her on the bed, and, even more bizarrely, dressed her himself, wrapping a scarf around her neck. An unusual gesture, being overly attentive during the visit to Trout, doesn't allow the doctor to properly examine his wife's neck. He cries, gets agitated, hugs the body, and always positions himself in front of it. The doctor, unable to carry out thorough checks, attributes the death to a sudden heart collapse. Case closed, or at least it seems that way. In the days that follow, Trout's behavior grows more disturbing. He repeatedly changes his story about finding Zona and shows exaggerated theatrical grief. And those who knew the couple begin to bring up some disturbing points about their relationship. That marriage was not happy at all. But there is no evidence. No one except one person, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, cannot accept her daughter's death. But what doesn't add up? And then the unthinkable happens. He said it happened for 4 straight nights. The local ghost appears to him not as a vague shadow, but as a clear, real presence. And during that apparition, Zona supposedly told him the truth. She says that Trout was violent. That night, a fight broke out, and he, blinded by rage, put his hands around her neck until he broke her cervical vertebrae. And to prove it, Mary Jane, the local ghost, turns her head backwards, showing her broken neck. Mary Jane decides to tell what happened, even though it seems absurd and the result of a vision. She goes to the local prosecutor and makes a nearly sacrilegious request for the time to exhume her daughter's body. Surprisingly, the authorities agree. When Zona's body is examined again, the truth comes out in a brutal way. Her neck was actually broken, her trachea crushed, and her cervical vertebrae fractured. So not a heart attack, not a natural death, but a murder. Trunchew is arrested and brought to trial. The physical evidence is weak, almost all circumstantial, but there is one witness that no one can ignore: the mother. During the trial, the defense attorney tries to dismantle the case, ridiculing Mary Jane, pressing her, and openly accusing her of making up the ghost story. But she doesn't waver, she doesn't change a word, and shows no hesitation. She recounts every apparition, every detail, and every night, with such calm and conviction that the courtroom can't do anything but remain silent. The jury listens and incredibly believes her. Trunchew is found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in the Moundsville Penitentiary, where he will die just 3 years later, never confessing. Today, in Greenbrier County, an official historical plaque marks this case with a chilling phrase: "It is the only case in American history where the testimony of a ghost contributed to a real conviction." Coincidence, collective suggestion, or a voice from the afterlife that refused to remain silent? The difficult verdict is up to you. Seven stories. 7 lives changed by what we cannot explain. Ghosts that appear, voices that whisper secrets, presences that remain etched in memory. All of this reminds us how thin, fragile, almost invisible the boundary between the world of the living and that of the dead can be. And now, a question I want to leave open to each of you. And if one day a voice from the afterlife knocked on your door, would you be ready to listen to it? Let me know your opinion in a comment. The Unexplainable podcast is an original format, written and directed by Luca Parella, designed by Matteo D'Alessandro. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or share it with your friends. Goodbye, and see you at the next episode of The Unexplainable.